So, hello everyone. I'm Janet Sibanda. Welcome again to another installment of Mwanangu Mtanami. And thank you so much for joining us today. We are super excited to have this interesting topic between the sheets, right? And we have our guest here, Mr. Samuel Mijo. Welcome, Sam. How are you? Sam, for some reason, we could hear each other. Now I can't hear you anymore.
Sorry, welcome everyone. It's nice to be here.
Oh, yes, we
I'm
are
excited.
super excited. We are excited to
Yeah,
have you here. So, welcome and thank you
absolutely.
for joining us. You and I have been talking, we've been setting up for this meeting for the longest time. And yeah, let's just get right into it. Can you tell us a little more about who is Mr. Samuel Mijo?
Yes. Um, I'm a simple person. I'm someone who loves people. So a lot of my work is working with people. At one point, I was a high school teacher and educationist, and now I work in development. I
Hmm.
do a lot of work around sex and sexuality. I'm a human rights defender. I engage in different platforms nationally, regionally, and globally as well. I've got many networks that I work with. I'm also a human rights Alumina Fellow from the University of Columbia. My background is around gender, sociology, and development. I do a lot of work with women, and I'm also a therapist by profession. So I do talk to a lot of people, trying to understand and help them through their issues as a profession, but also sometimes I take it upon myself to help whoever reaches out to me.
Lovely. It's wonderful to hear that information because we're tapping into your therapist side and the work that you do around sex and sexuality today. So let's get right into it. Right. Um, our topic today is Between the Sheets, exploring intimacy within committed relationships. Okay. And I think we're going to start with trying to understand the anatomy of men and women. So, my first question to you is going to be, what is the sexual life cycle of a woman, essentially? Like from the time that she starts to be engaged in sexual activity, how do we chart the map of her needs or her desires and what her body is telling her for a woman, essentially?
Well, I'll not make it too technical because, we know biology and so on, but I want to be
Yeah.
really real about how people navigate through life. If you look at a young woman when she's growing and she reaches a stage where she has a first period, something kicks in, her hormones start playing up. You find,
Yeah.
especially if it's a young lady, she starts getting shy. Some are quite assertive, but you also realize that with the first period, sometimes young persons are not prepared for it. And
Mm.
I remember even growing up in high school, when a girl gets her first period in class and she messes up the chair, she gets shy about it. She covers with a jacket, with her friends help her, and sometimes they even skip school, because of that embarrassment. And boys will laugh at her and so on. But I think
Yeah.
what also becomes interesting along that journey is that you also find young women also taking interest in themselves in terms of upkeep. They want to dress in a certain way, they want to cover certain things. Those who are more assertive want to perhaps explore more in terms of dressing. They want to dress the way that makes them feel sexy, the way that sometimes, depending with your background, some women want to actually cover up because they start becoming conscious of the body changes. Is she
Yeah.
growing her breasts and so on and so on. And what was also interesting is that when with from the boys' point of view, when you're then looking at this young girl, yeah, young men as well, you start seeing those changes. And
Mm-hmm.
people get also excited to say, "Oh, do you see that girl? You like look at her bums, her she's glowing and all that." But also you find that also young women also start getting excited in men, and this is a very tricky age, especially around 11, 12 years of age and so on, where you also find letters are flying in between. And mothers also become conscious, especially if they
Mm-hmm.
have a first period. It's sort of kicking into to womanhood. And that's a tricky space to be, because you also find guidance then becomes very difficult. I've had parents in my where I live who would come to me and say, I found a letter in my daughter's bag. She's only in grade 7. So
Yeah.
sexual debate has also changed. You find young people are maturing very quickly. Partly it's also genetics, but we also look at the lifestyles that we live today, where there's a lot of genetically modified foods and so on. And young women, their body presentation becomes quite big. A grade 7 young woman or girl might actually become or looks like a Form 1 or Form 2 girl. And you
Yeah.
also find when then boys start looking at her, she's likely to reciprocate. And in
Mm-hmm.
most of our context, it's very difficult for a mother to start having those conversations about boys. And in a society like us, where the social fiber is also changed, having manatete and so on is not really there as much as we would like. People
Yeah.
rely sometimes with people in church, depending where what their belief system is, whether it's church or they still have certain aunties that comes in, or might be sent to an Amainini to speak on these issues. But when they are being spoken to, it's actually deterring the young woman from getting into any sexual activity. There's issues around abstinence and so on.
Yeah.
But the body has its own mind, especially when hormones are kicking in. It's very difficult sometimes to say no to it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why you find mothers want to channel the girl to spend more time within the church groups that are grooming young women or young boys and girls. And when then people are getting into sexual relations, it's always so different for young. I get the feeling that young women sometimes starts early because of the pressure that's coming in. Pressure
Mm-hmm.
from the boys, pressure from other young girls who are saying I'm having sexual relations and so on. Yet sometimes it's not the case. We all
Yeah.
want to express how we've already started having a boy and already having sexual relations, but it's not always the case. Sometimes people boast without actually being in a relationship. But also, the exposure of technology has also changed, in that young people are also exploring about themselves through social media, through social platforms, through Sekuru. I call him Sekuru Google. He offers you everything and anything. So,
Oh yeah.
when a young person is also exploring their own body changes, they easily Google. And when sometimes you try and educate them, they'll actually tell you and are more informative about these issues compared to the parents. So these are some of the issues that you find in young women. And with young men, you also find there are also changes that they go through. When you're having your wet dreams, you also see the body changes. You're also waking up with erection, with an erection in the morning, and you don't know how to handle it and so on. But you also realize that with young persons, especially with young women, with young men, sometimes they take a bit longer to actually get into relationships. It requires certain skills to actually approach a girl and actually say the first words. And you can only learn some of these skills when you're interacting with other young men who say, I know, how can I get that girl? I like her, I'm interested in her, and so on. So, and also having sexual relationships also starts a bit later, maybe around 2021 for some young women, young men, sorry, compared to young girls who may start at 15, 16, and so on. That's why you find that the conversations around early child marriages has been quite topical, because you're also seeing young women who have been pushed into marriage because they assume that because they are now sexually active, they need to be married. But with the young men, you may find 25, 28, they're still trying to find their way within the social structure, within their career, economically, and so on, and they're making the decisions. But there are some, of course, that might start sex early. But also, we need to take into account the fact that there are also different social structures that we use when we are growing up. If you spend more time in church, you find that the guidance that they get from the church elders also delay sexual uh, practices or sexual enjoyment for young persons. But there are others who perhaps, because of curiosity, may start early. But also, you realize that with young men, you know, they they are more the sexual appetite is quite forceful also in the puberty stage. You know, even if there's a lot of pressure to engage in sexual relationships. And you find that with young men, sometimes the knowledge and the information around how to have sex is not there and so on. That's why you find sometimes a young person then impregnates a young woman because they don't know. But I've also had young persons who say, my first sexual relationships were with a sex worker. Interestingly
Okay.
enough, a
Yeah.
cousin or an uncle wanted to help this young man to experience the first sexual relationship. And for that to happen, people pay for sex. I've also had young students in their A levels and early or part of their career also saying, you know, they had to pay a sex worker to teach them how to have sex. But not everyone is going goes that way. You also have some that starts with their own peers, and
Yeah.
they are not quite knowledgeable how to enjoy sex. They think that when then they ejaculate, that's the end of sex. And sometimes, even if you ask young women their first sexual experience, it's either some will tell you, reflecting on what we now understand as rape, it could have been rape, but we couldn't call it that way. Someone would say, I was not prepared, but it happened. It was
Yeah.
painful. There was a lot of discomfort. And for young men, it would be like, you know, I scored. There's also boasting that comes with that. So this is the kind of two dichotomies that we get between the two genders.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So when I think at this point, because my network is acting funny, my audio and my sound are not synced. You can hear me clearly?
Yes, I can.
Wonderful. So now my question then is, when we're looking at the target audience of this discussion right now, men and women in committed relationships, people who are married and who are having sex on a regular basis, at what point can you now start to look at their ages? Who peaks at what time? Are we congruent? Are we moving in sync? Or is there some kind of a disconnect between, let's say, sexual appetite or sexual need as we grow older?
Absolutely. Sometimes there's a disconnect because I can't hear you anymore.
Where did you lose me?
Well, I think it's your video. It's still trying to explain your questions, but you've already stopped. Yeah. Yeah.
Let-
So you were asking, and I think you had finished the question. I think sometimes you find in some relationships there's a disconnect. Why is
Mhm.
there disconnect? People vary in terms of how they enjoy sex and at what point they've learned how to have sex. And it
Okay.
usually starts when you're boyfriend and girlfriend. When you're boyfriend and girlfriend, there are variations of how the courtship happened. There are some
Yeah.
that have to wait until they are married,
Uh-huh.
where you really want to show and embrace your virginity and say, I'm giving it to this man that I've betrothed myself to and I've agreed that I'll marry. And their first sexual encounter could be when they're married. And you find that for men, sometimes they've already experienced how to have sex and they might have these ideas on how to have sex, but the woman is not. And then you also may have couples that get into a sexual relationship when both of them have already experienced sex. It could be good or bad sex. But still, in coming into that relationship, they might have an idea of what they feel and think sexual pleasure is or what sex is. And then there are those that are a mismatch because the other person might have higher sexual appetite and the woman might not be. So when you're now in a relationship and you're married, half the time you find that what makes sex enjoyable and important to both parties is how communication happens about it. First of all, I believe individuals have to first learn about their bodies. And they can learn this through the experiences that they're having with their partner. Which part of their body makes them excited? Because all of us, when we are being brought up, and depending with what um, system of upbringing you came up with, whether it's religious, African, and so on, you find there's a lot of conservatism around sex and sexuality. We don't want to talk about it. It's conservative in that people always think to have sex It's just penetration, and that's it. So even when you're in a marriage, the first few years you're both excited to be married as a couple. For the ones that are starting with the point of the wife doesn't know, or the man doesn't know, or the husband knows, the wife doesn't know. And in that kind of scenario, you need to know when to talk about sex and intimacy and the enjoyment of it. In most marriages, I've noticed that people don't really talk and communicate about sex. What the wife might know is,
Mm-hmm.
when my husband is doing this, he wants it. So I have to play my part and oblige to satisfy him, because women are taught that when you go into a marriage, you have to make your husband happy. You have to fulfill the duties of a wife. The how is not really taught in some situations. So
Mm-hmm.
the wife is more pleasuring the husband and satisfying the husband. I've had a lot
Okay.
of women saying in their marriages they've never experienced orgasm, because the
Okay.
conversation is not happening. What would make you reach orgasm? And when then the first few years you have kids or you have a child, the concentration and transfer of unpleasurable sex of the wife sometimes it's transferred to the child, in that you spend more times catering for the child and sometimes even neglect the husband. Or if you are giving in to the husband's demands for sex, it's almost like a chore and not something that you enjoy. So there's a lot of communication that needs to happen between couples. And communication about sex should not happen when you're already being intimate, because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it can be a turn off for somebody. Imagine you turn around and say to your husband, "Can you play with my tits, for instance, or my breasts?" And
Mm-hmm.
he, not something that had not been communicated before. And perhaps is not the guy who likes breasts, and when they are being intimate, it can be a turn off. So it's important that couples sometimes outside the intimate sessions have times in their bedroom, or depending where they feel safe as a couple, to actually come together and say, "Honey," or depending whatever you call your husband, baby, or sweetie,
Yeah.
paya patinobatana nebonzi dzipi nhengo dzaunoda kuti ndinyatsokubatwa zvangu ndikurire zvimwe wangu.
Uh-huh.
Wotaura kuti iwe ukandidai zvinenge zvinonakira izvi unozvigona here, wakambozviita here, and you laugh about it. It should be in a safe space where it's the two of you. Iye
Mm-hmm.
wobvunzawo, but baby, pepe pandinodaidai ndozvauri kudai, ndezvipi zvimwe zvandingakuita ndokufadza. Because sometimes women can make you think you are doing it so well and so good, yet you are not, perhaps because they just want to have their hair done. Or
Okay.
they've realized that it's easy for me to just pretend, and they start believing their pretense in the marriage for a long time. But it
Uh-huh.
will then get to a point where sex then becomes unpleasurable even for the men, because he now knows all I'm doing is getting that 2 seconds in ejaculation and not really enjoy the sex, because they are looking for something more. So when then men go outside and find something that is different, whether it's a small house, sex worker, or something, you find that then introducing it in the home becomes difficult, because you've never had time where you talk about sex and how to pleasure each other. There's an exercise that I usually do with different parties, and I've done it with even with parliamentarians, interestingly enough, where I would ask individuals to take a piece of paper and draw
Mm-hmm.
themselves.
Yeah.
And I would say, don't show the piece of paper to anyone next to you or close to you or your husband. I've also done that in therapy. And
Mm-hmm.
say, mark all parts that you think you find pleasure when being intimate.
Yeah.
And I will mix up the pictures when I'm done, and I'll simply pass them to individuals to have a look. There are people who find pleasure in their toes. There are people who find pleasure on their thighs, on their
Mm-hmm.
ears, on their necks, on their belly buttons, when they
Yeah.
kiss, on their forehead, and so on their eyes, and so on. But the intimacy we are taught to have and enjoy, we all rush to the penetrative sex. So it means
Uh-huh.
that when it comes to pleasuring each other and really get to a point where both of you come, there may be missing points along the way.
Yeah.
So these are some of the things that comes up. Then there's also an issue of Sometimes when women give birth, it also affects sometimes to a certain extent their sexual life.
Mm-hmm.
You are busy breastfeeding, you want to feed the child, you are running around fulfilling your duties in the home, you want to do your business. These days, everyone is hustling. It doesn't matter if it's an office work or you're selling your tomatoes by the roadside or a woman is rushing to the field to do her gardening and so on. We seem to have
Yeah.
so much busy life. So sometimes our sex become mechanical because we are not really taking time to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes women lose their sexual appetite compared to the husband. So some of the intimate, three-quarters of the sexual encounter that happens becomes a chore than where someone is actually feeling the pleasure and the enjoyment. Now, but
Yeah.
they may not show it. And I think this is where sometimes we can be very deceitful. With the men, it's easy when they ejaculate, they feel I've reached climax and I'm there. Because when you are having intimacy, there are different stages of intimacy that happens. The first time when someone is touching you, you get into a certain position of feelings that you are enjoying from someone touching you.
Yeah.
And then there's a point where you feel I need someone either to penetrate or to be penetrated, depending. And then
Mm-hmm.
you get to a point where you feel like he's riding with me, I'm riding with her, the rhythm is okay, it's going together. But sometimes men rush to end the game when they are, when people are doing a lot of pounding, they think they are winning the game. I'm getting there, I'm getting there, I'm rushing there, I'm almost there. But the woman
Mm-hmm.
might not be ready.
Yeah.
She may still need a lot of stimulation and so on and so on, which may have been skipped or might have actually happened, but she's not there. So
Mm-hmm.
when then it comes to issues of climax, whether it's an orgasm that you are getting and so on, sometimes it's not always that you get it at the same time. Women might delay, or some women might come early. Men might delay, and so on and so on. So there's need to communicate.
Yeah.
Honey, are you ready? I'm still a bit far. Keep stimulating me this way. Those body parts I've asked you to pinpoint. Keep touching me here. Keep that language happens. But you also realize that many people are not good communicators in the bed. They don't want to
Yeah.
talk. Someone says, when you talk, it turns me off.
Shh. Yeah.
Exactly. Stop screaming. Shh,
Yeah.
hold it back.
Mhm.
No. Sometimes they even muzzle your mouth if you are
Oh
making too
yeah.
much noise. That's why it's important to have a prior conversation before the
Yeah.
bedtime. Remember that little talk I spoke about, which is
Mm-hmm.
outside the bed that you need to have. And when you touch her on those parts, even with that silence, the sound she will make is telling you you're in the right direction. Don't rush to score, especially if you want intimate sex. But you
Mm-hmm.
also need to realize that not every sexual encounter is about intimacy. In Shona, we always say, "Paninguwa yawanongoda kunzi kungokwepfurwa." Let me put it like that to lighten my Shona. You just want someone to bang you in English. You are not waiting for intimacy and all that, and just want the relief out of it. And you also have times when you feel, I want him to slow down, I want him to take his time, and I want to know. So when you also look at issues around, at what point do we have these different sexual experiences? Imagine a husband has come from work, or they've come from the bar. They just want to have a relief. You might not expect sometimes to reach orgasm together. Then there's a time when it's about we want to make a baby. It might have some intimacy, and you can remember that this child, I got it when we were doing A, B, C, D, and it was amazing. And you also have a time sometimes where the woman wants sex, but the man is not interested in sex, but he might give in also to fulfill the obligation that he has to the wife. And in that scenario, you also find that even when it comes to climax, it also differs. So I think what is important
Mm.
between couples is to talk about it, and not always talk when you are angry and frustrated because you didn't get sex. Not talk about it when you are already stimulated, because
Yeah.
when stimulation happens and someone does not oblige, you find that's why you find in certain situations we've had issues where someone would say there's marital rape because someone seems to be forcing themselves on you because they feel they've paid lobola and so on and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes difficult. The intimacy might be strained. Then there are also situations when you're angry with each other, people respond differently to anger. Someone feels the only way I can get rid of my anger is to have sex.
Yeah.
And they want to bang you and show you, you know what, you pissed me off, but I want to teach you. And then there are situations where the wife might say, I'm angry, I don't want anything to do with you in terms of intimacy. But the husband wants. And the anger might not have been communicated. Maybe you didn't bring the children's shoes that the wife was expecting the day before, or you did not fulfill a certain obligation the day before, but the next day, the next night, you want to be intimate.
Yeah.
Someone then become very frigid in bed and not as active, but you still relieve yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But what then happens is the more you have marital issues, the more your sexual life becomes strained. The
Yeah.
frequency might not be the same, or if it's not the same, when you then actually have it, the other party is really mentally disconnected because issues of sex, sexuality, and intimacy has to do with the mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
If your mind is not in the right place, you will not enjoy it. You might do it as a chore, but not actually enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens a lot, especially when women then have kids and other responsibilities. You are so frustrated about a whole lot of things that when your husband then have sex with you, half the time you're not in it mentally.
Yeah.
So it's important that we prepare our partners and ourselves in dealing with marital issues outside the bedroom. One of the rules that I've seen working with couples or even with myself is never go to bed angry and do not have issues that brings animosity, anger, and in the bedroom. When you're already going to bed, that's when you start asking, but you didn't pay that bill, or you didn't send mother money for milli meal or for grinding meal, and so on. And then you expect to be intimate afterwards. You don't really get to enjoy sex. But then the last point I want to make is that remember the upbringing that I spoke about. There are some men and women who are quite conservative about sex in bed. They are not exploratory when it comes to intimacy. So if you feel you were brought up from a religious background, you are prim and proper. When you get into the bedroom, when the husband is asking you, can you go down on me? You might say, why? It's unhygienic, it's dirty, I don't want to do it. I'm a Christian woman, I've got values, and so on. And that's frustrating for a man. Or the wife might say, I want a guy who goes down on me. And the husband say, I don't do that. I'm a man. It also issues around patriarchy and also comes in because sometimes men want to control sex. They want to control the marriage. So the marriage can also be controlled through sex. I have sex when I want with you. You have sex when you want with me, and so on and so on. And that affects the sexual life of individuals. So in this instance, you find that when people then get married, they stop exploring more about their bodies and what actually makes them enjoy sex. Because someone is
Mm-hmm.
now saying, "Ndamaiweruadzano," I can't be seen kneeling down and giving you a blowjob or things like that. Because trust me, in a lot of issues and men that you hear outside there, they boast about what this woman did to them and that did to them, and they didn't know. And we've also seen video clips leaking of porn videos leaking of celebrities, or some celebrities saying, she went down on my balls, and all those kind of different intimate details you can think of. It's because where we are today with the exposure of pornography, videos and information and so on, people have realized that you can still enjoy sex beyond just the penetration. There are certain things in the bed that can bring pleasure to the marriage, but all this has to happen where there's hygiene.
Mm-hmm.
It's important Hygiene cannot always mean. I remember one time people laughing at Madam Boss for not shaving her armpits. Some men like armpits with hairs, some don't. But how do you make sure you're taking care of it?
Yeah.
That it's not a turn off. If you shave down there and your husband loves it, how do you also make sure that those days you want him to go down there, you are prepared and it's clean, it's so hygiene and it's the same thing with men, circumcised men and uncircumcised men. If you want to also do a blowjob, how do you make sure, all these intimate issues? And I remember also recently there was also a picture, I think it was a chief who was with a lady touching a breast or wanting to suck a breast or something like that. These are things that people find quite pleasurable to do, but hygiene is also important. But if you're a woman who has spent the whole day tired and you didn't bath before getting into bedtime, it can be a turn off. It's the same thing with men. You've got your breath from your chibuku or your castle and so on. It might be a turn off for somebody, but it can be turn off for somebody as well. So it also comes with
Yeah.
talking about it and being able to be open about what you like and what you don't like as a couple. Kana makambonyengana pekutanga muchitsvetsvana muchinyengerana kuti iwe ndokudai nokuti wakadai uri mutete uri mutsvuku une magara akanaka. Why can't we continue the same conversation to say, honey, tane vana, but I still enjoy you. But toda kuti izvi zvatinombozviita pamakore edu, can we now talk about it and do this? Because I think one of the difficult things within marriage is that if you have never tried a certain sexual position during your early days, who introduced new ways of doing things in the bed? If it's the wife, she's afraid to be accused of, where did you learn this?
Yes. That's true.
If it's the men, they have all excuses and or internet, they can explain it, but the woman cannot also use the internet as an explanation. So it's some of those things that I've said earlier. Start having intimate issues and conversations early in your marriages, even if when you then have a virgin and you're starting to explore your sexual life as a couple, start then talking about it.
Yeah.
Can we try this? Can you try? Because you also want to teach the woman, or she also wants to learn more about her body and how it responds to sex. So talk about it. And I think this is one of the difficult things for couples. They don't talk about it. They usually
Yeah.
do it in action. And in action, sometimes you think you're satisfying your partner by banging her a lot, yet you're actually missing a certain part of her that can actually make a rich orgasm. And sometimes for women, it might not be penetration, but just playing with a clit might actually make her come. You can use your tongue, you can use your hands, you can, all these things are intimate issues that you can talk about, and she might actually come. Some women will tell you, I can come not because of penetration, but when my husband does this. And someone will say, if he's big and endowed and is doing A, B, C, D to me and playing with some parts of my body, I can come, even if they come afterwards. So these are the issues that people have to talk about. The last one I've also seen where sometimes women produce a lot of, waters. Let me put it like that.
Lubricant.
Lubricant,
Lubricant.
exactly.
Yes.
And for some, it's actually pleasurable to see that because they are then encouraged to say, I'm doing it well,
Yeah.
But some who are turned off by it, and I've seen where people would write and say, my wife produces too much lubricant and that's a turn off for me. I don't like the noise, then it brings in the intimacy and so on and so on. I think it's also to understand your partner's body responses and see how you can also, go with the rhythm and enjoy that. Communicate. Because it's
Yeah.
important to also know that dry vaginal sex can be painful for women. When you actually prepare and she has, she's well lubricated, she's well ready, it's actually good for her and it's also good for your relationship and your sexual life. So these are conversations that needs to happen between the sheets. Are you there? Our network is going up and down. Hello, Janet? Seems we have lost here, but I hope
So
I'm still on.
my
Yeah,
network is
go ahead.
acting up. I hope you can hear me. Network
Okay.
is acting up. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Hi, Sam. I'm here.
Yes. No, I wanted you to go ahead and ask the next question you wanted to pose.
Yeah. So I have I would like to take. So someone actually said, so I can pick up gender dynamics in sexual relationships wherein sex is just meant to please men, and we need to change the
Yes,
narrative, right? This is
absolutely.
something you were talking
Absolutely.
about when people bring patriarchy into the bedroom and men want to
Yes.
dominate the space. So that was a comment from one of our. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, the comment is quite
Can
right.
you hear me
And you
still?
know, yes, I can still hear you.
Yeah. So for me, as you were
Yes.
talking, so many questions. Yes, so many questions came to mind, and
Mhm.
you were flowing, and yes, you were flowing, so I didn't want to interject
That's fine.
and interrupt. One of the questions I want to ask is, just look at the question I'm putting up.
Okay.
All right, so I'm back on. Yeah, my question
Yeah.
is, what is intimacy? Because now we're looking at it from this full spectrum of many issues that you've talked about. So
Mhm.
if you're saying that when it's not just about penetration, how then can we define intimacy? And also, how then can we nurture proper
Mhm.
intimacy because of the definition that you're going to give us?
Absolutely. Look, intimacy is about being comfortable with your partner, being cozy with each other wherever you are. Is it in the bedroom where sometimes you simply lie on his chest while he's reading his phone? You know, these days newspapers are on the phone. Where sometimes you just come home, you're in your lingerie, depending where you are and which background you come from. The two
Mm-hmm.
of you just touch and explore each other's bodies without really thinking about penetration yet, but just appreciating the beauty of the woman you're sleeping with or the man you have in your bed. Because sometimes men also want to be appreciated. That's why
Yeah.
we always say, we need to move away from men don't cry, men don't do this. Men also want to be appreciated. That's why in our show now, people would say, kana shumba or mofo wadi vakona basi hanzi unongonyatsotenda kuti maita apa. So it also depends. If it's someone who's very English, you can also say it in a different way. But I think it's
Yeah.
about expressing it to each other and appreciation of each other. It can be just deciding that the kids have gone to bed early. Do you watch TV together as a couple without putting kilometers between the two of you and simply
Mm-hmm.
lying on each other's lap, sitting next to each other, your husband putting your feet on you, or things like that? That's what intimacy involves. And when it's in the bedroom, it's also about body exploration, touching each other, licking each other, moving your hands in areas, just to brush it with your breath, with your hands, things like that. With the men, it's also appreciated. Some people have big tummies like us. How do you rub a tummy? Just say, dedapa magabatana. Just those appreciative moments are what
Yeah.
we'd call intimacy. And sometimes we don't have those, we can't have those every day because we have busy lives and busy careers. But you need to set aside days and moments when you do introduce that within a month, not years. This has
Mm-hmm.
to be done almost every month. At what point do you simply take your wife out, even when I'm a grocer and say you walk there and buy meat? But if you are someone with a car, I drive. But when you are driving there, I've seen sometimes in the morning, the husband is looking that way and the wife is looking that way. Everyone seems upset and it's early morning. And I'm thinking, okay, what could
Most
have happened in the
cars.
morning? Exactly. Perhaps when you woke up, instead of being intimate, you were already being asked, "Ya, muye ne Maria, or hapana chakanaka." Maybe
Yeah.
you've been stuck for 3 weeks because you are not obliging to the expectations of family responsibilities that the wife or the husband was expecting. So those kind of things then kills the intimacy. And I also want to say to people, intimacy, especially when you want to be then have sex at home, does not start when you get through the door.
Yeah.
It starts when you are during the day, when you're both at work and say, honey, I'm checking on you. How is your
Mhm.
day, by the way? My day is fine. I'm looking forward to the end of the day when I would see you. Then he knows things are going to happen. And when he picks you, sometimes he can do the unusual and open the door for you. But of course,
Yeah.
if he's not someone with a car, I'm going to talk me rubber bus stop and say, oh, I realized it was 6 o'clock and it's late. I was just by the shops. I thought I'll just wait for you. You pick each other up. You're already preparing. That's intimacy. You're communicating with your bodies, with your words, with your, all these kind of things. And when you get home, even if you wanted to ask about that little task he has not done, that's not the right time to ask it. Leave it for tomorrow or the first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
You go and bath together if you can, or if your house or your lodgings or your shelter allows you to do so. Go and rub each other's back. It may not happen every day, but once in a while you're appreciating your woman, not only in the bed, but in other spaces. You know, even just rubbing a feet after work is an indication of intimacy to say, you know what, I appreciate you. It's a long day. And it doesn't happen to be just the woman in the office. Mukadzi wako aswera ari kumunda imimi munoitirana pamwe ndakuunzira zvangu zvamukairi mbodyawo. It's intimacy. That is communication. It's appreciating the mother of your children or your wife or the partner that you are living with in the home. So that leads to the type of sex you are going to have for the night, which might be different from the one bum thank you ma'am that sometimes happens because someone just wants to fulfill their, and women and men can understand that it's not always when we'll have this good intimate sex because of different schedules, different moods, and so on. But once in a while, we'll have what I would call quality sex, where your soul, your mind, your body are in sync. And when you have orgasm or you ejaculate, you feel like, man. You might even go and buy a car the next day. So these are things that we should look at when we talk about intimacy. And even just going to a shop and buying your wife a chocolate box or something that she likes and just spoil her for the day. We are already showing some of those things. We only sometimes people or men and women sometimes think about these issues on birthdays or on Valentine's Day. It's not when it should only be done. It can be done any time of the day. Sometimes you can go through my jiggies, depending if you like my jiggies, and say, I've thought of you. But if you've got kids, of course, you give them to the kids. But he might bring a little bit of chocolate that you might like. So these are things that intimacy really entails, just being comfortable. And and you might even communicate with each other by the eyes to just say, you know what? Sometimes the husband, the wife might say, but or if you're appreciating your man, it's the same thing. Baby, I'm going to so eh? All those kind of things bring intimacy. That's what we look at when we say intimacy. But of course, if you are also from a different affluent space, sometimes people do, candle lighting, dinner by the candlelight. They run each other's bath with petals and oils and so on and so on. So it just depends what part of society you come from. There is anything and everything that you can do to show or being intimate. Are you still there? So these are the issues that sometimes people don't really understand, that for intimacy to happen, where do we learn this? We are all brought up very differently because a lot of us, we tend to replicate what our parents' marriages were. That's why you also find that when it comes to gender-based violence, you always ask people, why
Hello.
are you beating your wife? A wife should be beaten. kumudzidzisa, kumuticha, and all that, because that's what they were taught at home. But in therapy,
Sam,
we
can you hear
always
me?
say, yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So we're back on.
So
Carry
in
on. It's
therapy,
okay.
we always say you need to change your script. The life script can be changed. It's not fixed. What your parents
Yeah.
used to do, you can do things better. Because our
Mm-hmm.
parents were taught kurova mukadzi kumuda, mukadzi anofanirwa kungosatisfy pabonde, and he's not worried whether she got satisfied or not. And worse, when they are little bambinos, the kids we love, we are not concerned about whether she had an orgasm or not. And that brings me a conversation someone was telling me yesterday that, there were a group of men in my industry who were talking, and one of them says, nwangu anoricha orgasm ndakamudai ndakadai, and the other person said, ko orgasm yacho chi? But this person has been in a marriage for 15 or more years. And then the people started explaining. They were speaking in Shona. They started explaining. So what akazoretracta hake, but you could also tell kuti munhu uyu there's no clue kuti mudzimai wake waagara naye akambomurichisa orgasm here, ende rinoonekwa sei, because information sometimes is limited because of the conservatism or the way we're told kuti sex is sacred, you can't talk about it. So people,
Yeah.
as they go, and sometimes what they learn might not be the right way of doing things in bed, or they might think it's the right way because ndozvaari kuda, which might have a disconnect between what the wife might want. So even then, when you see some of the video clips that comes out, sekunzi mukadzi ahura or murume ahura, and pamwe unoona murume wacho murume akasvika akaungana ane zvitunhu twake anenge ari kutadzwa kuti he's hustling, but mukadzi wake achita. What is it that they are not getting? A lot of issues has to do with intimacy. Dzimwe dziya dzandataura kuti it also comes up if people are always angry with each other on issues. Bonda harichaitwa a month or two, bonda harisi kuitwa, someone starts looking outside. Don't always think it's the men who look outside. Women also look outside these days. They're quite empowered to look outside of the marriage, which is bad because there is no communication happening to actually resolve some of the issues. So you
That's
find,
true.
if you then see the person about, I'm sure you've seen video clips where the husband is taking wife, I want to show him and the boy is being beaten up. And you wonder, is it about sex or there's more to it? Sometimes, yes, it could be issues of money, but there's also issues of intimacy because the guy or the woman outside is communicating and telling him, when you come to my house, the first thing when you get inside, get in the bath, I'll wash your back, I'll wash your feet. You get into bed, you make sure the sheets are clean and so on. Until they get what they want. If they ask them, I want you to go down, she obliges, she has that freedom and so on. But marriage sometimes takes away the sexual freedom that individuals have. But there are also couples that I've seen who actually have more sexual freedom in their marriages. And they've also explored other things that are not conventional things, but they actually say their marriage is healthy. I've also seen women who say, we've come into therapy and say, I have a problem. And I would say, what is the problem? After I've been with my husband for a long time, I've discovered I like to dress up for my husband when we want to have sex. But he's not up for it. When I say dress up, they might want to dress like a maid. They want to dress like a nurse.
Role play.
Exactly. And the other part is not reciprocating because they think this is stupid or it's silly and so on. But for this woman, this is what turns her on. And she was actually saying, I'm now in a second marriage and I'm having the same issues. It means if it's not resolved, it will continue to go through a different marriages.
Yeah.
Or you'll have men who would also come and say, my wife is frigid in bed. And I say frigid, she only moves here and there. But I want her to do A, B, C, D. But when I told her kuti mbondi garirao or do A, B, C, D, he would say, zvinoita here izvozvo. So when that happens and it continues for years like that, yes, children are being produced, but the sexual life is what I would call boring. And someone then starts looking outside. That's why you find at one point with so many small houses are willing to give and do everything and give in on everything that the other party is demanding. But they are also very exploratory of their bodies and would ask the men, because there's communication, to say, someone I also want you to do A, B, C, D. not a doggy style. That's the only position that makes me come. But before that, I want you to touch me here. Let's take your time. Let's do A, B, C, D, and so on and so on. Unless Kangoroka quickie or it's a morning glory, that's different. Someone might want a morning glory and the other part might simply be obliging. And sometimes it's okay for someone to just oblige, because it's also important to know that we all do not have the same levels of high levels of libido or the same sexual appetite. So it differs. So issues around compatibility can be a challenge in marriage. The husband is highly sexually active or have a higher sexual appetite, and the wife has less. Or the wife might have more and the husband is always also saying, I'm tired. So those incompatibilities do exist sometimes in marriages. And we need to acknowledge that they do exist. But you need to find a middle ground where you also help the husband or the wife to make sure that certain needs are met. Where they are not, trust me, in marriages, I've seen people who would say, sometimes I go and masturbate in the bathroom when I'm bathing, but they have a wife at home. It's not always that. Sometimes you want a person or to be intimate. It's the same thing with women. Women also say, I would go and masturbate and so on and so on, to fulfill that extra that perhaps my husband cannot meet. So issues around intimacy, it's not always that it's penetrative or that you want the other person to be present. There are times when you simply want to be by yourself, but it does not demean the other person's role and responsibility in your life.
Yeah.
I think this is where sometimes there are tensions. Why is she masturbating? Why is it? Sometimes it's not the case. It's simply those issues around compatibility that might not be there. But of course, you also find that sometimes men then give an excuse of saying, that's why I went outside the marriage. You are not meeting my obligation. So issues of frequency of intimacy or sex within a marriage varies. Some people want it every other day, but every other day, remember, has to happen within a context where you're addressing your marital issues. If I'm angry, will you get sex? Or if the person is upset, or they are tired, or they've been taking care of a sick person, or they've had a certain duty and so on. Then you also realize that some people would say, I can go for 3 weeks without sex, not because they are cheating, but their sexual appetite might not be as high
as
the other person. There could be a whole lot of underlying issues there. We also need to understand these days we have these lifestyle diseases that we have these days. You have diabetes, you have blood pressure, you have stress. Stress is among our people, and trying to make ends meet, and intimacy might actually be affected. So these are issues that also couples need to really talk about and consider when it comes to issues of sex.
So
then go ahead.
You've been preempting a lot of my questions, which is why I've been letting you just carry on talking. But let me ask one. A lot of what you're saying for me is hinging on sexual liberty, right? So I want to understand, like in your sessions when you talk to couples, at what point or how then do you guide them towards strengthening confidence within their marital, their sexual encounters in the marital sense, to instill confidence, increase trust and communication, so that this liberty and this freedom can be expressed? What is it that you kind of take couples through, so that as our listeners are paying attention, they're also able to pay attention to some of those subtle nuances? But before you answer, I just want to read a few of the comments. And one person is saying, I hope you'll share Sam's contact details in the description. I definitely will. And then we've got someone saying, very important, most suggestions are always underestimated. And then someone is talking about how you mentioned that a lot of what we learn is from how we were brought up, and there's a lot of unlearning that needs to be done. Yes. And then someone is talking about Hanzi, nyaya zemvura yakawanda dzanetsa. I agree with you to say that the body is natural, that the body is natural, it's the body's natural response, and it's normal. Men need to stop bashing women on this. And yeah, we've got a lot of people tuned in. Mavis says interesting, and a lot of people are bringing insights. Someone said I really love the drawing picture thing, so yay for that. Now you can carry on and go ahead and answer my question regarding to sexual liberty and how
Yeah.
to instill confidence, trust, and freedom to express communication, how you feel and what you want.
Well, sexual liberty starts with the self.
Mm-hmm.
How comfortable and appreciative are you about your body and the changes it has gone through after giving birth, after you were married? Because the way you looked when you were before marriage and the way you look now might have transformed.
Yeah.
And you find that a lot of women actually these days, I think, from my own analysis, there are a lot of women that are having self-esteem issues. Why is that? You find there's a lot of enhancement of the body that's happening these days. Men want big butts. We are seeing these women shrinking their waistlines and expanding their buttocks. They are taking pills. We have seen the bleaching of the skin is also becoming in thing. That's also people are embracing. You have seen a lot of women, putting in extra stuff on themselves to try and idolize what the society sees as the new it of a woman. It could be a celebrity you admire, it could be locally, or it could be somebody that you have seen there, slay, there's also the slave queen mentality and so on. And that takes away the beauty of who you are as a woman. And to address that, you first need to appreciate yourself. Take a mirror and put it there and say, stark naked and say, I love this body. And if you love it and there's something that you want to change about it, is it the weight? Is it the wrinkles? But the wrinkles are beauty on you because they are showing you've given birth to beautiful kids that are fluttering around, that everyone loves and appreciates. So it's also looking at self-esteem issues. It's the same thing with men. Men also have self-esteem issues. Trust me. That's why you find or they use money kunyenga because they cannot really have the confidence that someone can simply love me for the way I look with my pot belly and no muscles and so on. So it's also about appreciating yourself. So the exercise that couples can have to start with is, do you take a moment in your home on a weekend? Maybe you can send the kids to grandma or to the park with the maid, or for the day out, or depending with if you have one room, let them play outside, lock your door, and simply look at each other's bodies and see if you still appreciate it. Why? Because I've had a lot of men who say we have sex when the light is off. They are not appreciating the woman next to them, except kuti kana avhara apfeka hembe ndimai vana vangu haanondidadisa mukadzi uyu. When it comes to issues of sex and intimacy, love the body you are in and embrace it. If you want to change it, then take the necessary steps. Is it exercising? Exercising cannot always mean going to the gym. It could be walking in your neighborhood, or watch what you eat and you give your kids vegetables. I encourage with everybody, black vegetables. Make your meals less starchy and you eat well. Once in a while, yes, you want pizza, but don't make your lifestyle be this fatty foods we see on the market and all that, and going to chicken in constantly. You're bound to lose the body that you would appreciate. So issues of fitness and wellness of your body is important. Then when you look at yourself and appreciate each other before intimacy, because remember I said intimacy ikaitwa maskati pamwe maybe kungonzi mimitenderero, things are happening. Appreciate it. This is where intimacy comes in. Look at each other, appreciate all the wrinkles and say, touch them, embrace them, caress them, and so on and so on. That's one thing that you can do. The other thing that you want to do is, what is it about your sexual life that you want to change as a couple? Each individual take their own piece of paper and write the things that they feel they want to change and things that they want to do more of. Swap the papers.
Okay.
Because you're having an honest conversation, which you're not having with the outsiders, or you're having the two of you and say, honey, let's sit down that little task. Piece of paper.
And
And so on. And you swap, then discuss it.
And it must be a judgment-free zone, right? I mean, this must
Absolutely.
be clearly laid out.
Start asking, but you don't do and so on. You have all and both agreed that you want to to make your sexual life a little bit more exciting and healthier.
Mm-hmm.
When you have done that, then speak about what are the things that we cannot do that affects our sexual lives that we've been doing before. Like I said, don't take your phones in the bedroom and start texting while both of you are laying on the headboard.
Yeah.
If you can mute your phone in the night, do so. And that beside bed, you're busy being intimate, it goes guarr, guarr, someone keeps calling you and calling you and calling you. Now madam is thinking, it must be small house and all that.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of modern people, I would call them modern or, affluent people, think putting a TV in the bedroom is the it. It can actually distract sexual healthy life, because
Mm-hmm.
someone is always constantly at that quick set to go and watch their soccer or watch their movie and so on. Never have
Yeah.
a TV in the bedroom. Have it in the sitting room if you want. If you've got 2 more sitting rooms and they are rich, fine. You have a parent's room where you can watch your TV, but not in the bedroom. So it also affects your sexual life. But also look at how busy are your lives and how much time are you availing for intimacy. I'm not talking about sex, intimacy. Remember the
Mm-hmm.
little tricks that I've spoken about. Taking a walk together. Like these days, the weather is quite cool in the night. If your neighborhood is safe, do you ever take a walk together? Vamwe vanhu vakutotya kuonekwa nevakadzi vavo during the day. I know at night he's the last to get into the house. In the morning he's the first to go out. Only when they're intimate, he wants sex is where he's present.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in such situations, sex becomes a chore, a
It's
routine.
mechanical. Yeah.
Exactly. So you need to make time, a conscious time. If you have a busy schedule, sometimes just agree to say every end of the month we go out for dinner, or we go out for takeaway, or we go out for a walk, or we go to the park, depending what's safe for you, and just talk to each other. Leave your if you've got a car, drive outside town and take a walk in that bushy area just for a walk and just talk things mooted to without being heated about it. Because what then happens is when things are always heated, the husband spends more time in the bar with friends and comes home every time at 11. The kids are already sleeping, you're already pissed off, and he wants sex.
Yeah.
Or you have been waiting after 6, you're horny, he's not there. By the time he comes, your libido has already gone down. And
Yeah.
when then he tries to, you be like, I wish he had come earlier, but up and down, wait, I choke. So it's also to manage your time for each other as couples. Remember, when you have got kids, sometimes people forget being intimate, forget being there for each other because we are too distracted by taking care of the kids. So you also
Yeah.
need to balance that. And
So
sometimes it happens, especially when you have the first child, second child, the woman becomes more engrossed and focused on the child and forget that you still have a husband. The
mm-hmm.
husband, don't give him sex because it's now a duty, because give him his own time, the you time. If you can let somebody look after the kids for an hour or 30 minutes or so and just be the two of you, it's okay. You know, I will sometimes see couples going for bride together, sometimes with their kids, sometimes alone. It's good. Or even just to
Yeah.
collect a pizza, but along the way, don't always talk about the problems you have. Talk about the two of you. Hey, John Shamar Tagarates, I still appreciate you and you still look good. I made them dress Ramapeka Nasir. I like it. When she walks into a restaurant and they are sitting her down, let's turn for a minute to appreciate her. So these
Mm-hmm.
are things that needs to happen to actually help to improve some of these things that you can actually do at home as little exercises. The last thing that you can also do, and I think it's something that I always say to couples, do after some time. Take a piece of paper and write things, 10 things that you still love about this man you have been married to.
Yeah.
10 things that you don't like about this person. The husband can do the same, but you don't need to share with each other. If
Okay.
you can name 10 things that you like about this man, this husband, this woman, it means your marriage is still on the right track. If the negatives are lesser, the better. If there are more, then it means both of you need to do a lot of work. Because if you look at the quality of sex and intimacy you now have, it has become mechanical and it's a chore. And
Mm-hmm.
interestingly, a lot of women I have spoken to say sometimes half the time we fake orgasm
Mm-hmm.
just to make sure he gets off me. But there are times when, of course, I'm also in. I may not get an orgasm, but I feel, the connection and the intimacy. So imagine if you've got too many negative issues. At what point are you really having quality sex? At what point are you having just enjoyable sex, even if it's a one bum thank you man, because it's also needed.
Yeah.
Where you simply go at it and you are done, you're like, yes, let me go to work. It's in the morning. But you need to also have enjoyable sex. Now, when it comes to to bodily autonomy, you find that you find that men still want to control the body of a woman.
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
need to, like I said, change what I would call a script. A script is almost like every one of us is a script we are writing. It's almost like it's a book, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it was a movie and would say, give us your script, it would be interesting to watch. So everyone has a script. And a lot of the chapters we have written so far are informed by how our parents used to also be intimate.
Yeah.
Vanoti vana vese varara, no one is speaking, zvinenge zvechiwande. So it wasn't as enjoyable as our mothers would have liked to. That's why kwaingonzi havana mai vanongogarira vana, because pamwe bonde racho was not that good. But the fact that they
Yeah.
have these little bambinos, she would stay.
Mm-hmm.
But for couples these days, you find a lot of marriages are breaking because of issues of infidelity, issues of money, and so on. So to make it more interesting is actually to change the script. What are the things that you can change in terms of controlling the body of a woman and later enjoy her body with you? Because the more she loves herself, she's confident about herself, the more she can give it to you with pleasure. It's the
Yeah.
same thing with men. How do you take that macho patriarchal view of what sex is? Trust me, some women know more about what sex is than men, because sometimes women are more open to Google and use Google. Men are stuck in those I know. So we need to unlearn certain things and actually enjoy sex. That's why you find these days in Zimbabwe, there are a lot of individuals that are selling sex toys and sex pleasure label tools.
Yeah.
Some people are not that open, especially if you are very conservative, to be open about introducing some of these little things in your bedroom. It could be flavored lubricant. You remember, as I said, some women have dry vaginal, problems, and because they may be taking medicines, or they may be on hormonal therapy, or they could be on
Mm.
birth control pills, which might make them difficult to actually prepare themselves. So they might need that extra lubricant. Buy strawberry lubricant in your marriage if you can.
Mm-hmm.
That saint between the two of you, that bond saint, can actually be enticing. Some have little tools and gadgets that they might introduce to pleasure each other before they can actually use the tools. Because the ego of a man is, my tool is the only tool that my wife is going to enjoy, and that's it. But probably that's not what the woman actually enjoys more. There's a lot of pleasurable points that might need a bit of enhancing for that tool of yours to actually satisfy your wife more than you can even imagine.
Mm.
So these are things that also those who are open-minded might look at. What sexual intimacy issues can we bring? Is it the chocolate panty? Is it the, is it handcuffs? Things like that, that makes, life more exciting. But also these, of course, commodities are more for those that perhaps are better resourced. But if you're not better resourced and come from a simple background where perhaps you don't have the luxury of spending more money, there are things that you can still introduce in your home. As I said, those little lists I've talked about, try it, give each other, communicate. And if the husband has learned something somewhere, talk about it. But trust me, the sex that you should have and always have should be safe for both of you. There should not be pain. Where there is pain and the other person is complaining is a problem. When I say safe, it also means how are you navigating through issues around using protection when you can. But in marriages, negotiation of
Yeah.
condoms is very difficult. But what I've also learned is that when then you do not use condoms and someone goes outside the marriage and they bring an STI, it can kill sexual pleasure within a marriage for a long time. because the fear now the woman has, or the man, if it's the one who got the STI, is, won't she bring it to me? What else is she doing outside if you continue with the marriage? But sometimes you find women stay if it was brought by the husband.
Yeah.
Then you are afraid of even going there. You remember those other intimate issues that I've spoken about. You're afraid of giving a blowjob because you're thinking, oh, I saw
Mm-hmm.
STI at some point too, he was sick and all that. Or if it's the woman, you also need to realize women's bodies also change. Sometimes you get yeast infection and so on and so on. How do you make sure you keep it clean and so on and so on? And then when you're having sex with your husband, how do you make sure he doesn't also get yeast infection and so on, so that he doesn't also feel discouraged that at one point he can go down without fearing having those issues? So these are issues that sometimes bring tensions in the home. And if then HIV comes into the marriage or in a relationship, you also find that it also affects intimacy. But I think we've also learned that with having HIV in the home, it does still not stop you having pleasurable sex. That's why these days people are talking about pre-exposure prophylaxis, where you can take, if your husband is, if you're a discordant couple, one can be on treatment, the other one can take pre-exposure prophylaxis to prevent HIV infection, and you can still, go down and do all other intimate things and touches and licking and caressing of the body in some of the exciting parts that the other person likes, in a safe way. So safety also comes with, I should not make the other person feel pain. If you decide to do role play in your marriage, make sure you are not inflicting pain that the other person might not want. I've also seen situations where a husband wants to introduce something into the marriage, and there's resistance from the wife because of that prim and proper upbringing that I've spoken about, and also the conservatism. It's also to speak about it, not when you're already intimate, but remember, have those conversations. Honey, I'm thinking when you do this to Mega, it might actually give me pleasure. Can we give it a try? Remember, hygienic issues needs to come into play for both of you, and make sure that sometimes when certain activities needs to be done, you'll have taken a shower first and so on. But there are times when you are not taking a shower, you just want to go at it. Also consider the rhythm and the pacing you are doing as a man, because remember, women also do not get the same levels of pleasure and then reaching orgasm at the same time with you. So when you pace yourself, you are also being considerate of the woman who is in bed with you, who also needs to enjoy sex. Because women, trust me, they enjoy sex as much as men, but because of the conservatism, they are also left out, especially if they're in a marriage. So we really need to consider some of these things. And I've also seen pastors who have been speaking around, people would laugh, how can a pastor or a church speak about intimacy and sex and so on? Because we've also realized that half of the, or three-quarters of the sex that we have is intimate sex, not always reproductive sex.
Mm-hmm.
So reproductive sex, when it then happens, you find that sometimes it can be mechanical, because we're also seeing high fertility issues among men and women in Zimbabwe, that are
Yeah.
failing to have children. And it's stress for a lot of men who are spending thousands of dollars trying to have children. And some, of course, who do not have resources. I think we have also seen some of these recent discussions around paternity issues that were brought up by Mugabe and so on. So some of these issues affect relationships and marriages. So it's important that when we are addressing these issues, we are quite open to talk about it, like you said, in a non-judgmental way.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
to me, non-judgmental way, it has to come with you, both parties, especially men, willing to unlearn some of the old habits and
Yeah.
embrace the new relationship and marriage you have with your wife, which may be completely different from your parents. So these are some
Yeah.
of the issues that we need to navigate within relationships.
Thank you so much, Samuel. I mean, I have learned a lot from all that you have shared. I think, like I said, as you were talking, you were preempting some of my questions. A lot of people are interested in knowing how they can contact you beyond this, because I think, I took some time finding you. I wanted to have this discussion from long ago. So clearly, not many people know that there are people with services like yours and how to access you. So we just want to talk about that. And I have learned that how we project our relationships to our children colors how they perceive these relationships as well. So like I said in another interview with another interviewee, PDA is good, public display of affection is good, so that our kids see that it's okay to express love and intimacy in an age appropriate manner, of course. And
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
but also as a woman, I am hearing a lot of what you're saying, because as a woman, I definitely crave attention. I want to be seen. I want to be considered. I want to be heard. And definitely, when someone points out my good features, I'm more amiable to them than a
Yeah.
person who tears me down. So men out there, if you're listening, and women out there, um, praise your partner, tell them what's good about them so that they feel desired, because at the end of the day it's about
Absolutely.
desire, right? About being
Absolutely.
desired. Yeah.
Mm, mm.
So as we wrap up, please just tell us how people can access your services. We just want to thank everybody who was here, who gave comments: Natalie, Elizabeth, Yemurai, Francis, Edith, Alois, Alfred, and Tuli, all these people, and Miss and Laudius, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for staying with us this long, if you're still here. And for those who are in the recap, thank you for watching this. So over to you, Sam, as we just wrap up with your access details.
I'm available on 0778 914 542, or you can drop an email to me at mijosam@gmail.com. So mijosam@gmail.com. Please reach out to me. We can have conversations. You make time, we simply talk, understand each other, and I will be able to assist where I can. But a lot of work has to be done by you. Thank you.
Wonderful stuff. Thank you so much to everybody. Thank you so much, Sam, for being here. Hopefully we can have another discussion around this. I'm sure a lot of buzz will be coming out of this discussion topic. So take care to
Absolutely.
everybody. We're done now.
Thank you, everyone. It was my pleasure being here. Take care. Bye bye.
All right. Bye.